Andrea, you've written in the Times Red Box today about new California-style plans that will see car makers taxed if they fail to produce enough electric vehicles. I think we can show everybody the headline. But we need a level playing field for UK manufacturers in the green revolution. Now, these plans will be discussed at the G7, but the truth is the infrastructure is just not ready, is it?
Well, the infrastructure has significant billions of pounds of taxpayers' money being invested in improving infrastructure. Already the range of electric vehicles in the batteries themselves is much better, and the charging infrastructure is improving.
Yeah, but improving is one thing.
Fast, very fast, actually. And of course, there is huge potential for green jobs, apprenticeships, and different technologies right across England, which is something that what Amber Rudd and I are writing about with support from Policy Exchange today. And specifically what we want to see with cars is the government's absolutely rightly agreed zero emissions from the tailpipe by 2030, but there isn't a specific plan to get there. And so what we're proposing is a carbon pricing, which we're taking from work we did in 2015 to get coal off the system, where we announce the date and then we put in a carbon price. And we should do the same with electric vehicles to require manufacturers to be building more and more electric vehicles every year, so that when we get to 2030, we have achieved that deadline.
All right, so these are staging posts, but as I say, there will still be question marks about the rate of increasing the number of chargers in terms of infrastructure. Ian, the news I hear is that you have just either bought or you're leasing an electric car. You've been critical of them in the past. What's changed your mind?
Well, I'm a complete petrol head. I buy all the car magazines, and interestingly, the car magazines are now obsessed with electric cars. They write about virtually nothing else. Andrea is right. There has been a terrific improvement in the network of charging units, but that needs to go forward much faster over the next few years. And I think people are much more open to looking at buying electric cars now. And the tax system also encourages this. That David Cameron always used to talk about the so-called nudge theory, nudging people to do the right thing. And that's what effectively I've done. You can write off an electric car against tax. I'm not buying one outright because I think the technology is improving so quickly that if you have a range for the battery of 300 miles now, in 2 years' time, that will probably be double that. And so you could be left with a virtually obsolete second-hand car in 2 years' time. So I'm doing it on a contract hire. But I'm quite... The thing is, though, you have to plan your journeys much more than you would in a petrol car, because you need to be sure, if you're going on a long journey, that you know where you can get your car charged up.
Right, well, there are two things, Alison. There may be or have been a big increase in the number of chargers, but are they evenly spread? Are there enough of them across the country? And the average cost to buy an electric car in the UK is around £44,000. I mean, that is unaffordable for most people.
Yeah, I mean, clearly at the moment we haven't got enough chargers and it's very expensive, but that's not going to remain the case. As with any kind of new invention into the economy, the change is quite slow at first, and then you reach a tipping point where all of a sudden you're away. And now we have all the major manufacturers are looking at moving almost entirely to electric over the next years. We've got a battery, I think, that's been made in China that can last for 1 million hours. So all these changes that are on the pipeline. You look at the smartphone when that first was introduced, it was way beyond the pocket of most people, but very, very quickly they started to come down in price. They started to become more available. They became the norm. And when you reach that tipping point of being the norm, then the infrastructure gathers around it, because all the manufacturers of charging points will be following the money, so they'll be making charging points, and it will happen. It might seem a long way away now, but we will, before we know it, it will all seem quite normal.
Are you going to buy one?
Yeah, I'd buy one. I'm rubbish on cars. I'm probably the total opposite of Ian. But at some point, yes, I think everybody will.
Right. Okay. Well, at some point, you've already got one, have you? Have you? Because I mean, the SNP have pledged to ban new petrol and diesel cars by 2032. You've got ambitious plans for low-emission cities. But Edinburgh's SNP Council admitted last week that their electricity network doesn't have the capacity to cope with a big shift towards electric vehicles. I mean, if that's the case, then are they the answer?
Well, they are the answer. I think that, and if you look at Scotland, I think the last figure I saw was in just a couple of months ago. Scotland has twice the number of chargers per head of population.
Yeah, but that is a problem, isn't it? If there isn't enough in the electricity network, that's a bind.
Well, obviously there are going to be challenges. There are going to be challenges in terms of the electricity network going forward anyway as we move to a green economy. One of the ways to cure that, of course, is to invest more and more money into renewable energy, which Scotland is rich in at the moment. We're producing about 100% of our own domestic use in electricity from renewable energy at the moment. And if the UK government would stop wasting money on new nuclear and invest in that, then I think we could get to the point where we can start to power these vehicles and other infrastructure using renewable energy.
If I could just gently point out that the offshore wind off the shores of Scotland is very much subsidised by the UK taxpayer, bill payer.
And which includes the Scottish taxpayer,
indeed, of course it does, but it is a UK effort to create green electricity, which is absolutely the right thing to do. We need to work together, but can I just say...
If you hadn't stood in the face for years of onshore wind, for example, we might be many further miles down the road in terms of being able to do that. Don't forget that it wasn't just onshore wind, but solar power that was held back from not being included in the contracts for difference auctions, and that's really delayed the opportunity for building on a network and producing more green electricity. Now's the time to create that rush to do it so that we can start to supply the EVs of the future.
And of course, Drew, you're absolutely right. But you will recall when I was Energy Minister and you were coming and bringing backbench debates that the big problem is the trilemma. It's also keeping the bills down. So people couldn't afford to heat themselves because of the additional cost on energy bill payers' bills of renewables. So reducing the subsidies was the right thing to do. Offshore wind is a fantastic success story. We've gone from 2015, where a contract for difference was £150 a megawatt hour, to now where it's under £50 a megawatt hour. We've got a fantastic direction of travel. But I did just...
want to go much further if it hadn't been for the UK government's obsession with nuclear.
Let's concentrate on the now, because in March the Department of Transport, Andrea, announced cuts to grants that help make electric cars more affordable. Was that wise? They went down the grant from £3,000 to £2,500 and restricted it to cars under £35,000. That doesn't sound like policy underpinning the ambition.
So that is the point that I was making about what I'm calling for today with Amber Rudd and Policy Exchange, which is for a mandate to manufacturers to produce more electric cars each year or pay carbon credits to those manufacturers who are making electric cars. So the government has two choices. It either mandates, i.e. regulates on manufacturers, or it subsidises consumers. And the subsidy for consumers, it's been employed in places like Norway, it's cost a fortune, but it's had the desired effect. For the UK government, in the past, we have been subsidising consumers to incentivise them to buy electric cars. It would be much better to put the boot on the other foot and incentivise manufacturers to produce the electric cars, because then the price of internal combustion engines will even up with those of electric cars.
Ian?
Andrew, they're already doing it. Every single car manufacturer is developing plans for a whole range of new electric vehicles. Why do they need to be encouraged to do it when they're already doing it?
You're absolutely right, Ian. They are doing it already. But the point is to get to zero emissions from the tailpipe by 2030. If you talk to car manufacturers, the design is about 5 to 8 years, and then the shelf life is about 5 to 8 years. So the problem is getting from here to 2030 with that sufficient growth, the rapidity of growth. So at the moment, about 1 in 7 new car sales is an electric car. It needs to be significantly higher than that to meet the 2030 deadline.
Are you in a bit of a... Oh, yeah, go on, Ian. Respond.
Isn't one of the problems also, though, that we have no battery manufacturing ability in this country at the moment? And so we are reliant on the world market for that. And one of the things that the government could do is actually encourage a couple of companies to set up and it would be a very expensive thing to do, and there might well need to be some subsidies on that to set up battery manufacturing plants in this country.
Yeah, so I'm pleased to tell you, when I was Business Secretary, I announced the support for a gigafactory here in the UK, and I do believe that there are 2 planned already. But you're right, most batteries at the moment are made in Asia, and that was a big issue with rules of origin under the terms of the Brexit deal. But as Alison said, all of this is going to happen very fast now, and you just look at the way that new technologies become a reality before you even know it. And this does take me back to 2015 when we said we're taking coal off the system. Everyone then said, oh, you'll never do it, the lights will go out. But here we are only 5 years on, and coal is virtually off the system.
Well, while we talk about those sorts of things, Are you in a bit of a bind with the SNP, because oil and gas are central to your plan for independence economically, but the Committee for Climate Change estimated investment in the energy sector may need to double to £50 billion per year to achieve net zero?
Well, we've got a fantastic opportunity at the moment, and indeed it's delivering. I think it's £5.2 billion in renewable energy from Scotland over the past year. That's matching the actual oil and gas output now.
Is it matching that? Well, what about all the redundancies? I mean, Oil and Gas UK point to initial forecasts that direct and indirect redundancies in the industry could be as high as 30,000 due to the pandemic and reduced investment.
Well, that's why the Scottish Government have prioritised the just transition from oil and gas and making sure that we're taking care of those employment needs to transfer people from the oil and gas sector into the renewable sector over a period of time. That's got to be something that we do, not only for the benefit of Scotland, but also for the benefit of the UK, because the UK still imports more than half of its gas for heating, and that's something that we just can't switch off. Otherwise, you have a whole other set of problems. But we do have to accelerate the just transition as quickly as we possibly can, and that means investing much more in renewable energy and putting a lot more behind it, including battery technology, solar, wind, onshore, offshore and other methods.
All right.
Drew's absolutely right, and also things like the supply ships, all of the infrastructure for the offshore oil and gas can actually be used for offshore renewables. Yeah. So there is that scope to change those jobs and actually rebuild the Scottish oil and gas as Scottish offshore.
Have you got an electric car? Yeah.
I will have one. I don't as yet, but the problem, Joe, actually, is having a car that is not old enough to get rid of. Do you know what I mean? Because you've then got the issues of scrappage. It's a fine balance.
In Scotland, we've incentivised loans to make sure that they can do it. So
under the Barnett formula. Thank you, Drew.
All right, who's going to get the last word? Me, actually.